start off the trail of us discussing about the demise of Toys R Us in the United Kingdom. Two pieces of news popped up. One piece of news around lunchtime today, and another piece of news literally maybe 15 minutes before we started the podcast today. The first piece of news that showed up was Hasbro did another investors panel essentially, and Brian Goldner pretty much was addressing a whole bunch of different stuff related to global consumer and retail advertising, blah blah blah, what's happening with their, and he did a quick mention about the current situation with what's going on with Toys R Us because of what happened in the UK. So they pretty much said, well, since the UK's no more, is there anything going on in the United States that you could tell us about? And this is, keep in mind, CEO of Hasbro, they were asking. And all he said was they're currently handling the situation with Toys R Us. They said it'll take about a year for Hasbro to, quote, right size their inventory. But in the meantime, Hasbro during that year will be catering more to online and brick and mortar shops to minimize the impact. Now, what does he mean by that, first of all, in this first part of the news? Well, right sizing, what that means is when retailers sometimes, when they have to deal with different kinds of stores, they have to make case assortments that conform to how those stores function. So it sounds like if they have to right size their inventory for Toys R Us, that means Toys R Us is changing their formula of how they were going to be receiving toys. No longer the big products and the big packaging, or maybe the 8 figures per case. Who knows what that means exactly? But when you hear right size in Toys R Us, that's not good news, because then that means that they're actually going down from their normally extravagant displays of product. You look at any section of any of their, look at their Star Wars section and how it's just this giant row side by side. Look at their Transformer section, that's a giant wall of stuff. Look at their Marvel section, their wrestling section. I could go on and on. But for them to say right size their inventory with Toys R Us, that's not good news. The second part, which was even less good news, was that they said it's going to take about a year for them to right size to their needs, probably because up to this point, everything would power the primes or whatever the next series is or whatever. They probably already had the case assortments planned out,
Yeah.
the boxes, everything's good to go, the packaging. So they're probably like, well, it's going to take a year before we engineer and then plan everything to match more what Toys R Us will need for the future a
Hmm.
year from now. So they said in the meantime, they're going to be catering more to online and brick and mortar. So that's kind of, so that's like, oh no, that's more. And Hasbro has a pretty decent relationship with Amazon. They've been doing a lot of selling through Amazon.com. So you're probably going to be finding a lot of, well, see, I'll jump into the second piece of news, which is the more distressing piece of news. So after this news came out, it was just like, oh, they're going to be focusing more on online and brick and mortar stores to minimize the impact in Toys R Us. News just broke about 15 minutes ago. Toys R Us of the United States is doomed, is no more. And this isn't like the news that we got in September where they were filing for bankruptcy with an optimism of there being some kind of, safety net that they could fall into. It seems that they're now legitimately making preparations to liquidate all their stores. So it seems that the optimism that they possessed before, where they were, hoping that someone would bail them out or a company would do that, seems to not be the case. And again, it's interesting that it's hot off the heels of Hasbro just announcing that they're going to have to take a year to change their system for Toys R Us. It pretty much told Toys R Us, probably in privacy, they probably said, look, we can't help you. There's
Uh,
nothing we could do. And I mean, again, this is something I get a feeling as we're going to be moving forward, we're going to learn more about this. But it pretty much, they're done. And now it's going to begin the operation of liquidating all their stores. And this is some terrible news, some
yeah.
terrible, terrible, terrible news, because I've said this before in our previous Toys R Us closure bankruptcy discussion, not the one that we just had, but the one when they first announced it in September. But it's just this happening in the United States is going to take a huge hit on a lot of things as a Transformer collector. As a toy collector as a whole, there's a whole bunch of other smaller problems that are going to exist too. But the one big problem is now it's going to once again lead to
It's gonna bleed
more of a
over, basically.
Excuse me?
It's gonna bleed over to other things.
Well, I feel that my biggest concern is the monopolization of product in that I've always hated Walmart and how much they have changed the game in a lot of ways. The old thing that used to say on the back of the packaging, colors and product may vary, that didn't start becoming a thing until Walmart started pushing for it. And what I mean by that is, for the longest time, usually the final product that was used for photos of packaging and everything was the final product. Usually, not always, but almost 99% of the time. Around, I'd want to say 99 to 2000, when Walmart really started getting into their strive of national takeover and then global takeover, they started bullying other companies to start, like, they would finish a Transformer product and
Hmm.
then they'd show it to them because they have to, and then Walmart would be like, well, we'd really like it if you made this product that's costing us whatever, let's say just for a simple number, $2 per unit. We want it that it would be $1.50 per unit.
Yeah.
And so then Hasbro has to go back and remove a paint application here, a paint application there. And I remember when that started happening, it started becoming this game where you could pick up an Armada toy, look at the back of the box or the back of the card back, and look at the toy there, and then look at what you held and pick and find all the different paint applications that were missing.
Mm.
And almost every toy suffered from that. And that was Walmart pushing. And that's one example. That's just Transformers. This was happening across the board with every company. Every company was getting problems. There was that short debacle where Lego was getting bullied by them, and
Yeah.
and there's so many things that were going on. But what sucks most about this is it's one less toy store for us to go to, and Walmart and Amazon now rubbing their hands together, going like, now we could, even if we want to, we could raise the price even more if
Hmm.
they want to. If they raise, as if deluxes aren't already expensive. If they want to put it to 21, you're not going to have many options, and it's going to be. And the thing that sucks too is Walmart is less likely to do flyer sales. You're less likely to get a flyer in the mail and it's like 40% off or 30% off or 25% off. They're pretty comfortable with the prices of their product. The only time they ever really reduce the price of their product is when they're liquidating it, when it's old.
Hmm.
But they rarely ever put the prices down of their product when it's still pretty fresh. Toys R Us does it all the time.
Yeah.
So now with Toys R Us not being around, now you can't even price match. Now you can't even bring a flyer from Toys R Us and try to price match their own stock.
Yeah.
So
True.
so so they're in this whole situation now where they're like, now we got consumers, proverbially by the balls, and it's
Do you?
terrible.
I was gonna say, do you think you'll see other retailers not necessarily pick up the slack, but um, like how you're seeing if you go into an EB Games or something, or a GameStop or what have you,
Well,
and then
EB
they're
EB Game
slowly having more toys.
EB Game and GameStop's evolution recently has been an abandonment of video games, almost as
Yeah.
crazy as that sounds. Now the average EB Games is 50% merchandise, 50% video games. But that being said, that's a whole other discussion. That's
Okay.
something that it's part of my feeling of companies pushing for digital more and more,
Hmm.
because they make a lot of money doing that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the point is, and not to mention they control the secondary market better, which EB Games survives on. But that's a whole other story, and GameStop. But what I think more so, again, it's now, if you're a Transformer collector in the United States, all you really have now is Target. And then after that, it's kind of like, oh boy, after Target, you're kind of like looking around going, okay, you got the limited selection of Walmart, which sometimes is pretty garbage.
Yeah.
Walmart is very, very hit or miss when it comes to Transformers, and they refuse to carry large product. So you might see only five or six leader classes at a time, where Toys R Us sometimes would have a wall of 12, 13, 40.
Yeah.
And then going into that Titan class, I have no idea where that's going to belong anymore, because Titan class was almost exclusively a Toys R Us kind of thing, and Costco when they would have a case of it or something.
Hmm.
We're going to be having a Predaking coming up now. Where is that going to belong in the ecology now of the future with Power of the Primes, let alone the future of any other Titan class stuff later on? I mean, you go to Toys R Us and you see those like 2 feet tall wrestling figures, 2 feet tall Star Wars figures, 2 feet tall DC figures that were hollow plastic and stuff. That was exclusively a very Toys R Us kind of product for their floor space and for their area. That kind of stuff doesn't exist again in Walmart. They were, Walmart has changed so much in the past decade, from being what it was then to now. Let's put a stronger emphasis on groceries. Let's put a stronger emphasis on clothing, and
Diversify your bones.
yeah,
Pretty much.
definitely diversifying like crazy. But as a result, the toy section is shrinking and shrinking and shrinking. So it's this is a crazy situation we're in right now. This is a very crazy kind of environment we are in, and again, the liquidating, which according to this article by the Bloomberg Marketplace, which is about as legitimate as it gets in terms of news. Bloomberg report
Business news
is
specifically.
business news, so this is going to be starting as of immediately, where some places are going to start already beginning liquidating. And I know that after we're done this podcast, more news is going to surface, and we will keep you guys up to date with what we learn. But I mean, this is nuts. This is pretty bad. And the only thing is, now this is the United States. What this means for Canada is still uncertain right now. But I guarantee if one falls, the other falls with it.
Yeah.
Where I imagine that Canada isn't far behind. And if Canada falls, Toys R Us Canada falls, we are even in a worse situation. Because, like I said before at the previous discussion, we don't have Target.
Yeah.
Um, like for us, if we leave our house and go, let's go buy Transformer toys, it's essentially Walmart, and then the scant, dead stock of of a Winners, which might have like one rescue bot at 14.99. Like it's going to be really bad
And
for
then
the.
maybe random exclusive stuff at EB Games.
Yeah, and
But
again,
that's like one figure. That's not even
and
a
the
wall. That's not
and the
even.
problem with EB Games, I find that they always add a dollar or two
Mm.
to the retail suggested price.
Oh,
So
okay.
if something was like 19.99, it might be 20, 21 over there.
Right.
Um, so it's that being said, it's not going to be good for the modern day collector in Canada. It's even worse. Like now, there's the options have shrunk even more, and what's even more scary, all these Toys R Us's are going to disappear, and now it's going to be these big pieces of land, which I know are just going to be occupied by Walmarts. So, or I can't even imagine what else they could be. It's going to be a crazy future going into 2018 and definitely
Yeah.
into 2019 for toy companies. And it's the big fear that I've had, which is toy industries have been taking a huge dip and a lot of stuff has been having problems in America. Where I think that, and it's the scary thing, Hasbro keeps talking about how China is the future. The
Hmm.
scary thing is, I get a feeling the whole toy industry is probably just going to emigrate over there, and
Oh,
and
okay.
it's going to be shrinking and shrinking, and Toys R Us is the first sign of that. When a giant like that of that industry dips, you know that all the smaller versions of that are going to go with it. In the same way that Blockbuster dying was just the beginning of the end for the mom and pop rental places.
Hmm.
When Blockbuster went, you knew, well, that's it for everyone else. It's going to be the same thing here, where this says a lot. It says a lot about how people get their toys, and not to mention what, not only how people get their toys, but just how people find enjoyment in toys, which is our generation. still enjoys it and buys it for kids, but
Hmm.
I know for a fact that the younger generation doesn't care.
Mm.
I run a video game convention and I run a toy convention, and I see the differences in the audience. The video game convention is a primarily younger audience. Almost everyone outside of parents there are under 18, outside of the dealers.
Mm.
And but the toy convention, you'd be hard pressed to find anyone under 18. It's quite
Yeah.
the opposite. Almost everyone is guys in their 20s and 30s and 40s and 50s and 60s. So it's pretty obvious the evolution that's going on there. And that's just a microcosm of an example. I can't even imagine. I wish I was someone who just stood at the entrance of Toys R Us and really paid attention of who walks through that door. And 90% of the time, I mean, I've noticed it a lot of times. Look, I go into Toys R Us on a Saturday, and so many times I feel like I'm the only guy in the toy aisle.
Mhm.
I always feel alone. I never feel like there's someone else with me looking at the Transformers, or there's someone else with me. I go into the video game section and I still feel like I'm alone there
Yeah.
outside of the one guy who's behind the counter in the video game section. Like it just became this big empty environment, and the title on top of that maybe encouraged people not to go as much. Oh, well, if I'm going to go get a video game, I'm just going to go to Amazon and have it shipped to me the next day at a cheaper price. Why would I go to Toys R Us, potentially not being there? I don't
Hmm.
associate video games with Toys R Us. As a consumer, you would think that.
Yeah.
So it's this huge gap of problems. The internet is obviously, we can't go without saying that the internet also changed everything.
Yep.
Where and I'm guilty of it too. If I'm gonna, chances are, if I'm gonna be buying a video game, I'm probably gonna pre-order it on Amazon just to play it safe.
Hmm.
Or alternatively, if I failing that, EB Games or somewhere where I could guarantee, where Toys R Us never had a pre-order system ever. If you wanted to pick up the latest, Amiibo or Zelda game, you just kind of had to be
Show
there
up.
day one. And that was a case where I remember when the Amiibo thing was huge, people lining up outside of Toys R Us to be the first to get the cracks at the Amiibos because there was no pre-order system. I think what Toys R Us should have done, and it was probably their biggest mistake, was they probably should have built a really strong online system maybe 3, 5 years ago,
Yeah.
and really, relied on that, where you could have even bought something from their online, and what they could do then is go, okay, well, this location has what you have in what you're looking for in stock, so we're going to relay a message to that Toys R Us so they could put it aside and you could go
You
pick it
could
up.
you
Or
could do that with our Toys R Us.
yeah, but the thing is, they didn't make a massive system out of that. You
Oh,
know what I
okay.
mean?
Because
Or like,
it seems like with most places they'll have
you could do local pickup.
yeah,
Yeah,
you could do like a local pickup, and then they'll also have whatever's in their warehouse
but I
that would
think
ship it out to
I
you
think
directly.
that I think that Toys R Us really, the one thing that bothered me with Toys R Us is that they had a lot of uh, just seasonal employees that were always in rotation. As
Hmm.
someone who goes to Toys R Us probably once a week minimum, um, I never see the same employees ever.
Hmm.
They're always in rotation. I remember someone even telling me that when you go to apply for Toys R Us, they actually interview you guys in groups, and they actually, when they hear that someone actually is a fan of toys, they don't hire them because they
Mm.
don't want that kind of person in the workplace. They want someone who's more not interested in the product, more interested in just being a worker and
Hmm.
not having an ulterior motive. But at the same time, you also end up losing someone who has a passion for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, for every one scalper you might have hired, there might be someone that legitimately knows Star Wars and could help customers.
Mm.
Although, again, this is a long-winded thing, but
Yeah.
at the same time, there's so many things that led to their downfall. So many things, and it's not surprising, but it's not a good thing either. It's
Yeah.
not a good thing for Canadians, especially. It's not a good thing for Americans, because now you're down to just Target and Walmart, which in a lot of ways are cut from the same cloth as it comes to toys. I think Target has a little bit of a better inventory than Walmart does, but I mean, Target could easily end up becoming the next one to take a dive if things don't change. So the online market. And now with what Hasbro said, where they said they're going to be focusing more with online, I think that us Transformer fans are going to find ourselves buying a lot of our Transformers online now in the future, where it's going to be a lot of, oh, the pre-orders for Predaking just dropped. It's like I just imagine we're going to enter that kind of domain now, where we're just going to be like pre-ordering our Power of the Prime toys and waiting for them to arrive at our door
Yeah.
from Amazon or something. Like as crazy as that sounds, that might be the case. Or alternatively, Walmart might just go, well, one less competitor. Why would we make an effort to sharpen up our online and everything when we have one less guy to
Yeah,
make us?
exactly.
No one's chasing us, so why run? So why stock up on everything? So I'm worried. I'm questioning a lot of things, but at the same time, this is stuff that we're going to have to see what goes down in the next couple of days, and the whole thing too with the brick and mortar stores. That's something that's not that common in Canada, so that's something that
I
we're
mean,
not
we
going to.
have them, but I mean, it's like they're not all carrying toys, you know?
Yeah, most of them really don't. They really
Like,
don't. They
I mean, like in toys in a sense of like, oh, well, you're gonna get your Legos, you're gonna like. We don't think Best Buy, you know,
yeah.
carries that kind of stuff. They kind of carry all the tech related stuff, the stuff that you can connect with your phone to move around and stuff like that, like the BB-8s and all that kind of
Like
stuff.
like if when a Best Buy gets product, it's usually like a very limited one case of something, or alternatively a Best Buy exclusive.
Yeah.
Which when the first movie came out, that was a thing. There was Best Buy exclusive Transformers, but that faded very quickly. So I mean, we'll see what the future brings. We might be talking to you guys again very soon about this. Who knows what tomorrow brings or the day after? But this is something that is very somber news,
Mhm.
and we'll see what comes from it.
I don't wanna grow up, don't wanna grow up.